In 1946, the Supreme Court handed down a decision banning segregation in buses that cross state lines. 11 years later, the Supreme Court handed down another decision banning segregation in the bus terminals in facilities that serve the interstate buses. But black leaders felt that the ruling was having no effect in the Deep South. So 2 decades ago, in 1961, CORE organized a freedom ride.
We were going to deliberately set about creating a crisis situation, creating what we called a creative crisis, whereby it would be more dangerous politically for any administration not to act than it would be for them to act. We realized that some of us are going to get hurt and maybe killed in the process. So what we did then was to recruit a small band of people, white and black. I think there were 13 in the first group, the group that was recruited. We went through a screening process and screened people we thought were secure enough and had sufficient inner strength to take what they were going to have to take on this trip, because we were going into the bowels of bigotry. We were going to beard the lion in his own den, and we didn't know how it was going to come out.
It's 20 years later, and this bus is filled with people on a different ride to freedom, a historical look at the Freedom Riders of '61 and at other focal points of the civil rights struggle in Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and Georgia. The first Freedom Riders planned to go from Washington, D.C. to New Orleans. Their trip along the way was fairly routine until they got to Anniston, Alabama, where a mob attacked and burned the bus. This violent incident brought national attention to the Freedom Riders and to James Farmer of CORE, the Congress of Racial Equality. Farmer led a second wave of Freedom Riders, picking up the ride in Birmingham and then on to Montgomery, where there was further hostile reception. Then the ride went on to Jackson, Mississippi, where the riders were met by local police.
He said, "Where do you think you're going?" I said, "My friend and I are going into the restaurant to have dinner." He said, "Well, I'm telling you to move on." I said, "Where?" He said, "Out." I refused on grounds of the Supreme Court decision in the Boynton case. He said, "I'm going to repeat the order. Move on." I repeated the refusal, same grounds. He said, "I'm going to tell you one more time. Move on." I refused one more time on grounds of Supreme Court decision. Then came that index finger. He said, "Follow that police officer and get into the patrol wagon. You're under arrest." It was all very orderly. Not chaos like Alabama. This is a police society there in Mississippi. Yeah, things didn't happen accidentally there, controlled. So Lucretia and I followed the officer into the patrol wagon. Others came in, same thing, follow that officer, follow that officer, follow that officer. And this went on for weeks and weeks and weeks, as every bus had Freedom Riders on it, coming from every part of the country. Trains had Freedom Riders, planes had Freedom Riders. They'd all go to the bus terminal and go in there to have Captain Ray say, "Get into the patrol wagon," and then into jail.
Most of the Freedom Riders were arrested here in Jackson, and many spent 40 days in jail. But the point was made, and it attracted national publicity, and the restaurant was integrated. Now, 20 years later, there is no lunch counter anymore. The restaurant has been replaced by machines, and there is no place to sit and eat in the bus station. The plan for the 1961 Freedom Ride was to go all the way from Washington to New Orleans. The riders never got that far. They were stopped here at the Greyhound bus station by the mass arrests. At the same time, there were mass arrests elsewhere in the Deep South. On our 11 o'clock report tonight, we'll take you to Macomb, Mississippi, where over 100 students were thrown in jail for marching on the main street. And tomorrow at 6, we'll go to Bogalusa, Louisiana, where they found out that nonviolence just didn't work. On special assignment, I'm Lou Davis.